Okay, this morning, in addition to our visit moments ago to the Interpretive Center, we're going to walk the loop designated as 1, starting from the Interpretive Center. And we're at the point about where between B and A on that route. And we're going to walk down to 72, and we'll go to look at the Borrow Pit, or Borrow Pit. And then we'll continue on around Twin Mounds and the Stockade until we get back to the Interpretive Center, and then we'll be done. Now, to further orientate you, notice in the upper right hand corner is Monk's Mound, and to the left is Woodhenge. On-site view of where we are is the Interpretive Center. Notice that mound had 2 levels on it, whatever one it was, number 55. There's Monk's Mound we climbed up yesterday afternoon. And off to the left here, probably about through the trees there, is the Woodhenge solar calendars. And then here to our immediate left is the first of Twin Mounds. And we can see that it was I'll call it a trapezoidal square. That may not be correct. But here you can see at least 2 sides. Remember, over time, soil would have sloughed on down the slopes. I don't think this was a real mound. Probably just a backhoe dump some stuff here once. Ancient butterfly. I think we're witnessing either a battle or the making of new butterflies. Now we're standing below on the map the Twin Mounds. Notice now this one is that flat-topped mound which would have held an important leader's dwelling and maybe some religious buildings and maybe some other dwellings for assistants or whatever, or family members. And then next to it is the conical mound, which we know was used for burials typically. The fact that these two are together, does that indicate some connection between the two? I would think so. Use your imagination unless you have time to go get one of the books that maybe the archaeologists have actually divined the truth. There behind us is a little bit of a stockade. My guess is it's an attempt to reproduce what once would have stood here perhaps as a large area surrounding these Twin Mounds. Okay, now I'm below the 2 mounds on the map, and in the distance on the right you can see Monk's Mound, the top of it. I'm going to pan around quickly so we can see where we're going to go. Down where that man is walking, and we're going down to number 72. And notice it's a different kind. It's that 3rd kind of mound, which is thought to perhaps delineate dimensions at one time that were important to the boundary of Cahokia. As we approach it, you can see that it's elongated. Looks like it might have had 2 mounds composed it, and then they were somehow connected. And here we're standing just off to the right of the long axis of this mound. It looks like it could have that low triangular cross-sectional design, but perhaps, if that's what its original design was, just over time it has sloughed off, so in areas right here it's depressed. Yes, this is Mound 72. This is a topographical, if you will, of Mound 72. Certainly appears that we've got a mound here, and then this may be that bulge that represented a mound. And then this looks like some kind of a prior structure, and it looks like it would have been a flat-topped mound lying underneath this mound. What's equally, if not more interesting, are these posts maybe suggesting that here was yet another solstice calendar or solar calendar, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. Now notice here's again what they think was the original design of this, that it is composed of 3 mounds, primary one to the right, primary mound 2 to the left, and then number 3 in the center. And notice the burial pits defined underneath them, also at 2 different levels. And then all 3 of those were covered into one final mound. Okay, here's a little bit different view of that. Notice here's our other mound down here, and that might have been primary mound number 1, and then number 3 and number 2. But it looks like, if I can interpret this correctly, that associated with these 3 mounds are these other burial areas. Here a fairly large one, and this one in turn broken down into a couple of subdefined, one called the charnel house, and the other, this part right here, is depicting this pit right pictured actually here. If we focus on the charnel house, I'll read the description. The western end of the mound there once had been a building, perhaps a charnel structure, where bodies were prepared or stored for burial. It had been dismantled and a number of bundled burials placed in this location, and at least 2 high-status extended burials with shell bead necklaces. The primary mound covered this group, then later 3 mass burial pits with 19, 22, and 24 young women were placed at the east, south, and southwest sides of this mound, which was then extended to cover them. The pit on the south side was later partially redug, and graves were deposited, including 36,600 marine shell beads, another pile of about 400 arrowheads, numerous bone and antler arrowheads, and some broken pots. That's what I just described as that area there. Focus on this area right in here. I'll read the inscription. Along the south side of these primary mounds, a number of burial pits were placed, including one about 6 feet deep that had 2 layers of burials. The upper layer had 10 litter burials, with 14 people who had been carried there on litters or stretchers, and the remains of several of the red cedar litter poles were still intact. This was a mixture of male and female, young and old. Below them, the second layer had 39 individuals who had been tossed in randomly rather than being carefully placed like the litter burials. These and other burial groups in the primary mounds were all then encased in a final capping of soil that formed the ridgetop mound, which we looked at as we approached, which is this apparent whole area. Okay, although there is not an arrow pointing to it, this burial pit here underneath what I think is primary mound number 3 was this drawing, and I'll explain this to you, or read it to you. Under the primary mound in the center of mound 72, which is number sub-mound 3, were 2 intriguing burial groups. Love the use of the word intriguing. 4 men were lying together on the former surface with their arms interlocked, but their heads and hands had been cut off. Near them was a deep pit with 53 young women laid out in 2 rows and piled 2 deep. And here is an excavation. Presumably that staining is giving them some clue also. Now this grouping I can't place on the diagram, but what it says is near the large post pit was the burial of a man in his early 40s laying upon a bird-shaped blanket or platform of 20,000 marine shell beads, perhaps an earlier leader of Cahokia. Another man was beneath him, and there were 6 other people buried around him. So this is apparently the large pre-mound post pit on the hypothetical site center line that's referred to. Now apparently these photos refer to a continuation of the dialogue with regard to this early leader of Cahokia. Nearby were 7 men and women with grave goods accompanying this leader. This included nearly 2 bushels of unprocessed mica, a mineral from southern Appalachians, more shell beads of marine shell from the Gulf of Mexico, 15 chunky game stones, and a staff made of copper that came from around Lake Superior. In addition, nearly 800 perfect arrowheads were found in 2 piles, made from chert, from Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. One of the small primary mounds was built over this complex. This diagram precisely orientates us in Mound 72 to Monk's Mound. It also enhances the belief that these mounds were somehow related to the cardinal positions. So east, west, south, north. Also, the solar calendar, or the wood henge located over here somewhere, is also on this east-west line, which also, notice, this whole grid is based off of Monk's Mound, that edge perhaps. 172 certainly gives us a lot to think about, doesn't it? Some of the issues that are raised here. 2 layers of young women,